Hello and welcome, Essex County College family. This is the Virtual Cafe powered by Student Life and Activities. Today's episode number 79, Black Votes Matter. It is February 2022. We are celebrating Black History Month, African History Month, as always here at Essex County College. Today is a very, very special episode. It's one I've been waiting and anxious to do for a while. Long before there was a me doing this on the internet, long before there was a Mr. Bundy doing this on the internet, there was Dr. Khalfani doing this. He was the host of The Pulse. It's Essex County College's most viewed show. If you look on it on YouTube, it's got thousands of views every episode, compelling content, excellent guests, awesome presentations. We're grateful to have Dr. Akil Khalfani with us this morning. He recently did a presentation about voter suppression, and it was very captivating and informative, and I hope to continue that discussion and hear him speak about the voter suppression movement going on in our country currently. So without any further ado, it is my pleasure to introduce the director of Essex County College's Africana Institute, host of The Pulse, Dr. Akil Khalfani. Dr. Khalfani, how are you doing today, sir?
Hey, I'm wonderful. Glad to be here. I'm honored that you all decided to do this, and I think that getting students aware of the things going on and being engaged, I think is one of the most important things we can do, is to help them to just to wake up to the possibilities of the things that they can do and realize that they are the change agent. So hopefully today we'll cover some of ways in which we think we can get them involved in doing those things.
Excellent. I just have a couple questions for you, sir, just for some of our new student viewers who may not have any idea who you or I are, but
Yes.
Let's find out about you. When did you come to Essex, and when you came to Essex, when I mean come to Essex, when you started working here, in what department did you come in and what was your position?
Right. So I came to Essex in 2005. So I've been here almost 16 years, and I started running the Africana Institute in May of 2006. So I've been doing that for almost 15 years, and this is the end of the 20th year celebration of the Africana Institute. It's been around for 20 years now, and as we get to May, that'll be the beginning of the 22nd year. But so that's what I came in as a professor in sociology and African studies. And that gave me a great opportunity to really kind of engage in what needs to be talked about in terms of looking at the whole history of sociological experience. In fact, when I came here, I started a program looking at it was a program looking at race relations through the sociology program. So I did a whole series of programs that first year here. Just really getting things off the ground, running real hard.
Oh, that's amazing. Can you tell us a little bit about Africana Institute? What's its purpose on campus? What does it do? What does it provide for students?
Yeah. So the Africana Institute is the Essex County College's Center for the Exploration and the Study of African History, Culture, Experience. It's a Pan-Africanist institute. So it looks at things from the continent, from the islands, other places in the diaspora, and the United States. So it looks at, so we celebrated all the contributions of people of African descent when we're talking about the Africana Institute. And we've brought people here. We bring lecturers here. We have a lot of different programs. We've been kind of compressed since the last the pandemic set on, so we haven't done as much as we usually do. But we usually start the year with a program in September called Bridging the Gap, and that brings folks together to talk about bridging the gap between folks on the continent and the islands, or the continent and the United States. Or we've also did it between bridging the gap between age groups. So we have the elders come, and we have the youth come. And we even did one year, we had a business breakfast, and we wanted to bridge the gap between African-American businesses and students on campus. And that was really a successful thing. We have I'm not going to go over all of them, but just to give another little flavor, we have the State of Black Writers we usually have in October. We do a pre-Kwanzaa event in December. Every year we do, obviously, the MLK program we do in partnership with Student Life and Activities. We have a slew of events for African History Month. And then we have, including usually we'll have our Garvey and Nkrumah lecture series. So we might have to move that to March this year, just because there's, as we're coming back and things have been a little different. Our last speaker for that was the mayor, Ras Baraka, but we've had all kinds of folks who've come, Malefe Asante, Tukufu Zuberi, a wider range of folks who've come for that particular lecture. And then we kind of end things up in the year with the African Spirituality Conference in March. And then we have our Pan-African Drum Festival, which has been a huge success every year. We have African drummers and dancers, and we provide food and all kinds of things. And so it's really, really festive, and everybody enjoys what we do there.
That's awesome. I'm a drummer. I would love to get involved in that the next time that happens on campus.
Okay. Yes.
Let's talk about the Pulse real quick. So, it's not post-COVID. We're in COVID, or however you want to call it. But before that, there wasn't too much of a drive for folks to be on the internet and streaming and giving people news, via video. But now that's a commonplace thing because of COVID and the kind of situation that we're in. But you were on top of being an activist and getting news out to folks way before there was a global pandemic. The Pulse, you're a celebrity at Essex County College. When I think about the hosts of Essex, you're the host. You're the premier host. Me and Mr. Bundy, we're hoping to copy all the good stuff that you did, and that's about all we can do. So we're thankful to have you with us. Tell me about what it was like making the Pulse. What was your favorite part about it, or what was a specific episode, or when you think about your show, what was like your bread and butter about it? What made you so thankful to do it?
Yeah, well, it's interesting. The Pulse was this idea. We came with a bunch of different names originally, and then as I was, we had I had a bunch more staff at the time, so it was I had a lot of people engaged in the process, and media production and technology have always been involved. One of the things that we were, when I was thinking about what is it that we're trying to describe and think about, we as a matter of fact, let me take a step back. We just won an award. This is our 10th. We've been in the Pulse has been going for 10 years now, and it's now an award-winning show. It won an award out of a media production called media production company called Total Faith Networks, and we received awards from the State Assembly for New York, the House of New York, the Mayor of Yonkers, the Westchester County County Executive Board. We receive recognition from all of them for our work, and I'm honored that is. But it's not just me. It's Victoria Tipnero and all the folks in the staff at Media Production and Technology. But for me, the idea for the Pulse was really to kind of say, what is it how do we get on the cutting edge of what's going on in the African and African diaspora community? What are some of the things? So who are some of the people? And so my very first interview was with Queen Afua, who is a huge personality and doing a lot of great work with women across the world. And so she came in, when I think about that first interview, we used teleprompters, and it was very kind of stoic, it was kind of rigid. And, after that, I said to myself, I got to go with this the way I flow. And from that first one on, I decided that I wasn't going to use a teleprompter because that's not really my style. I'm not a news reporter. I'm engaging in a conversation with the people. And then we did the before Mary Baraka passed, I did the last television interview with Amiri Baraka. I did interviews with the person before he left his position at the Census Bureau, the equivalent to the Census Bureau in South Africa. He was there. We interviewed him. Bob Pickett just passed. What's his name? The other brother, Ntume, just passed. But we had Bob Slade and WBLS, and they, came in and talk about what's going on in their show and how their legacy. So we had them on, and the director of lots of different places. So the thing for me was just that getting people to see that they can think and grow differently, and that there's stories out there that haven't been told that need to be told. We've had entertainers on there, we've had educators on there, we've had politicians on there. So it's about making sure that we cover the gambit of what the things are that we're in and doing, and making sure that everybody has the insight about those things that are important. And we have a few other ideas. I have some other guests that I'm lining back up. We haven't shot in a little while now, so I've been talking with Victoria. We got to get back in the studio and shoot again. The pandemic has kind of held us back some, but we're gonna get back out there and shoot some more shows.
Excellent. We're looking forward to. I know the students are as well. Your absence has been missed. We know it was a hard COVID for everybody. We're thankful to have you back, sir. So thank you again for joining us. Thank you for enriching the lives of our students with your amazing content. I appreciate it. We all appreciate it. So thank you.
You're welcome.
Voter suppression.
Yes.
Evil. Let me ask you this. Everybody should want to, conservatives and liberals should want to expand voting, because that's gonna make it easier for both sides to vote. No one should be trying to be counterproductive and dwindling the amount of voting locations, or diminishing the amount of time, or whatever objects they have in place to. I keep using the word counterproductive, but it all seems to be counterproductive to the ultimate goal, which is Americans' right to vote. It is part of the process. It's how we do this. So why would anybody on any side spend any time to be counterproductive and diminish the amount of places, locations, times for voting? Tell us about this, please. I'm having a hard time.
So let me just give you a little bit more about my background. One, I'm a sociologist, right? So I use history to talk about, describe, and understand things, but I use sociological analysis to help us to understand and to develop solutions to social problems, right? So that's the framing through which my comments will be. And when we think about the ideas of how folks are coming up with the idea about that we should limit voting, it's about control, right? It's about control, it's about domination. I mean, think about it. When we look back at the ideas of the, and I mentioned this in the lecture, that African Americans, after the civil rights, not the civil rights, before the civil rights, after the Reconstruction, that there was so many people who were voting, had the right to vote, but not only had the right to vote, but they were in office, right? And then there was a real culling back of that as white supremacy and oppressive ideas and ideas about control and domination as they resurfaced. And so what we have to do is look at that pattern, and then we begin to understand that this is a re-emerging pattern, right? This didn't pop up out of the blue. That there's a history of this. If you look at in this country, that at the beginning of the country, we talk about this. We kind of promote externally to the United States the idea of democracy. But when you really look at the origins of the democracy that we have here, that it didn't start as a fair, the terminology was that, but in terms of the process, that's not how it happened. So that there was always been voter suppression, because there's been the right to vote for those who are in control and power, right? And so when you look at the beginnings of the voting process in America, that you had the folks who were able to vote were European or white men who had money. And so then the voter suppression happened with everybody else. There was no voter suppression of just one group. Everybody else, their vote was suppressed. And that continued until there was this pushing for people to be able to have the right to vote. Women pushed for the right to vote, and they got pushed back. And so then there's this continued movement to make sure that there's equality. And there's always these folks who see that your access to vote potentially limits their access to control, right? And so there's this balance that's attempted to be sought, and it's a skewed balance in terms of it. I spoke about it the other day in terms of what's called a Herrenvolk democracy, right? And that was really looking at that as a democracy for a certain group of people who are in power and control, but the rest of people in society don't have a democratic process. So that when we look at that in American history, historical context, that we see that that's been the story of the voting process here. And it only changed when people put pressure on the system to be inclusive. And that's where we are. We're back at this cycle resurging its head. So you have suppression and you have surgence at the same time, right? So there's this surge for this control and a push to exclude other people's ideas, but then that manifests itself as suppression. You know, when we look back, that there were 16 people who were African Americans who were members of Congress back in the 1800s. And then when you have this pushback, right, then that number drops precipitously. And at the signing of the Civil Rights Act, the Voting Rights Act, rather, in 65, you only had five members of the House of Representatives. And so then that becomes this thing, how this movement pushing back from the presidential level to making African Americans not have the ability to have the access to vote. And it's not that the laws weren't there; the laws were on the book, but there was all these extra legal measures that were suppressing it. Now today, not only are there the laws are still there for having the right to vote, but then they're enacting additional extra legal measures to suppress it. So the suppression doesn't happen against it. The suppression happens in opposition to the Constitution, right? And so that's what we have to look at. What did the 13th, 14th, 15th Amendment of the Constitution say? And what are these laws that are being passed in various municipalities, states, and counties across the country? What are they saying in opposition to the Constitution? And so then the question becomes, are these laws unconstitutional? And that's where the fight is going to be. The challenge that having that as the fight, though, is going to be that people are going to argue their position against that, and so then you're going to have these diametrically opposed positions that have to be addressed and considered.
As this is happening in Washington, you're saying it's going to pretty much come down on the House floor. You're saying then between both sides, where you have one group fighting for this legislation to press down on voting eligibility, rights, the location, things like that, and you have the other side fighting against that. What is there anything that, like, we, the American people, can potentially do besides call our lawmakers to end stuff like that? How can we, because no one's going to be okay with this. So what can we do to help, like, thwart that,
Well, no, there are things we can do, but people are going to be okay with this because you have somebody pushing that legislation. You see what I'm saying? So there's a bunch of people who are okay with it, and it's not necessarily just on the congressional floor. It's in the local state houses. It's in the county houses, and I think that one of the things I had a slide on a thing from before, and I said that, what can we do? And I think the things that we have to talk about, and this is what your question is asking, what can we do? There's a laundry list of them. The first one I would say is that we've got to educate ourselves. We got to look at what things happened in the past, what things are going on now, and we got to learn civics. Unfortunately, as I'm out there and talking to folks, and I running for office, that one of the things that we don't know is that people don't know the differences between the municipal, county, state, and federal government, right? In terms of what things happen where, who has the authority to do what. And some part of the confusion, like, for instance, some roads that run through different municipalities are county roads, something simple like that. And you want to talk to your your municipal person to address the issue on that road, but it's a county road, so therefore you have to talk to the folks in the county, and the people who patrol that sometimes are not the police but the sheriffs, right? So sometimes it's simple things like that that we're not aware of. Right here in New Jersey, right, going through Newark, East Orange, West Orange is Central Avenue, a county road, right? It runs straight through. Park Avenue, county road. So who is responsible for them is that there's different. The county's responsible for the lights. The county's responsible for the plowing of it. And those things are things that we need to learn so that we can figure them out. Where does the money come from, and how does it get there? Right? Money from the federal government. A lot of times, most of it comes to the state and then or to the county, and then that money is then issued out and divvied up to the municipalities. And so those are other things we need to learn about how that happens, right? Who's responsible for what? Trash pickup is not the county or the federal government's responsibility. A pothole on your block is not but there can be federal dollars to aid your municipality in getting those potholes fixed. And so that's where people can learn once they learn who does what, you can advocate for those things differently. People got to register to vote, right? So this is one of the other major things. Got to register to vote. And I would say study the issues. Know what the issues are that are on in the municipal, in the school board, in the county, in the state, on the federal level. But there's another piece that we oftentimes get confused, and that is that sometimes things don't have to be laws, but they can be regulations, right? So then the FEC or the FCC, the Federal Communications Commissions, issues regulations that are similar to laws. They're not laws, but you still have to abide by them, right? And the other agencies have the same kinds of authority. The Board of Ed might say that this is what happens at the school. It's not a law, but it's a rule or regulation that has almost the same force of a law, because if you violate it, then there's consequences, right? And those consequences can be severe. Sometimes those consequences get partnered with laws. And then when they get partnered with laws, if you violate that regulation, and then there's a legal body that then has something to say about that as well. So making sure that we know the issues. I would say another one is making your community aware of the issues and aware of the issues that your community is concerned about. So then it's a symbiotic relationship. Sometimes we just want to be out there and be out front and say we're doing something, but we don't know what the issues are in our community. Or we don't take the simple initiative to, if we know something, to inform the community, right? So there's a symbiotic relationship between the community and the individual, and we have to focus on both of those. I have about three more I want to go through real quick, unless you want to come back to them.
No, go for it.
So the other one is either join or start an organization. Kwame Ture used to say, you got to organize. And that's the most important thing, is that folks have to be in organization. You have to either be in one, start one. And if there's another organization out there, don't just create an organization because you want to have an organization that you are now competing with another one for resources and people and so on and so forth. It's one thing if they're not doing the things that need to be done, but if you're just wanting to do it to have your name on it, then you started with the wrong intentionality. We want to, if there's another organization that may not be doing well, then join them and see if you can help them. Then if you can't find a marriage between it, then that's a different story. But either join or start an organization. Join a campaign. There's lots of people running for lots of offices, from school board to county executive to used to be freeholder. Now it's what is it called now? County commissioner. There's state offices that people are running for. All of those things you could help somebody you could be participating in their campaign and help you to learn a lot about the campaigning process. And then you know something different. Lobby. You can lobby for those issues. You can have your organization that's lobbying, or you can lobby on your own, go talk to politicians who are in office for the issues in your community, or start a lobbying organization. And the last two things are run for office, right? Once you've gathered that information, run for office yourself. Get people, galvanize people around the things that you're committed to, and make a movement and organize and run for office, and start with wherever you want to start and then move forward. And last is stay involved. It's not just about running for office or getting in office or getting someone elected to office. It's about what you do after they're in office, because those issues that they have to get pushed through, still there's lots of work to do on the other side, and that's what it takes to get them those things pushed through. I'm looking Craig Stanley's here. They fought back in the day for the Amistad legislation, and they got that bill passed and turned into a law. But it took a while for that to happen, and now then there's folks who are still fighting the implementation of it, and there's other folks fighting for it to further get implemented. So those are all kinds of things that staying engaged, staying involved is part of.
Now let me ask you this: so we get voting regulations and laws that come from Washington that apply to the whole country, but do we also have individual states coming up with their own mandates and things for voting? Do they have, like, does Paterson, New Jersey have control over its own voting laws, or does it have to take the advice from Washington? That's my question to you. Does each state have its own restrictions?
Right. So then most of what happens on the state in the states is informed by the states, right? So the states have their own home local authority to set. That's one of the challenges, that most of the, that's why you have different elections at different times across the states, different types of machines that are used in different states. There is no standardization, and there's a push for that. There's been some legislation for that, but it hasn't passed the House and the Senate. So, but there's a lot of pushback for doing that kind of thing. But I think that might be something that's advantageous, is to have some things more standardized. For instance, having election day when everybody, in many countries, the national election day is a holiday, and so then there's not an issue about people getting to the polls because it's a holiday. The other things is that then there's also the county involved. So the county has sets of rules that the county clerk and the county and the voting body that determines things within the county has another set of rules and regulations, and then even in municipalities, right? So the municipality has certain things, but the charters for each municipality is authorized by the state. So the state regulates the municipalities in terms of because most of a lot of people don't know this, but Newark, what today is Livingston and East Orange and all these, that was all Newark back in the day. And then Orange was huge. So what today is South Orange and West Orange and Orange and East Orange, that all used to be Orange, right? So then these municipalities were big, and then they got parsed up over the years.
Got you. I did not realize that Newark encompassed all that land at one point. That's interesting. Wow.
Yeah, if you go to City Hall and you see an old map, they have a really old map downtown City Hall, and you can see the map of where it used to be where the borders used to be for Newark back in the day. And that's I think is a when you see that is it's amazing to see that what we think something is not exactly what it is.
It usually never is.
Well, that's why in sociology we say question the obvious, right? Because that's what we call the sociological perspective. We question the obvious because the obvious is not always obvious.
I like that. I'm stealing it. Thank you. So let me give you probably not a realistic scenario, but let's say Essex County decides we're going to allow voting on election day, but only from noon to 7 p.m. And there's 2,000 of us who work during those exact hours. What is there to do for a town or municipality or county in that situation, the problem is that most of us don't know how to be activists. We don't know that first step to take. We don't know what to do other than what we've seen on TV. So I'm just using that crazy example of Newark saying there's only going to be 7 hours of voting on election day. If someone or a group of folks had a problem with that, and it's clear that there is a problem and it's affecting thousands of people in the municipality, what's the first step? Where do you go? What do you do to change that?
Yeah, that's a great question. In terms of how to be an advocate for change. So the first thing I would do is I would get the actual legislation that says that, right? So you want to actually read the legislation so that you know what you're fighting up against. Because sometimes we're fighting up against the things we hear in social media, and they're not 100% accurate. Some of them, sometimes they are, sometimes they're not. But you want to get the actual legislation so that you would know what it says. If it says Mayor Baraka issued an executive order saying X, Y, and Z, well, the thing is that you might read the newsprint, but that's not the actual executive order. President Biden issues an executive order saying X, Y, and Z. The governor does. Well, you have to, if you gotta read the actual document, right? Because I think that's the first step. And then if it finds out that what you said is true, and that there's only 7 hours, and then there's that excludes 50,000 people from having access to the vote, right? And so then you put that data together so that you have actual information to talk about, right? So that you want to say, this is that we have, in doing research, right? Even like social science research, you would say we have 50,000 people who work from the time of whatever that time is that's been restricted, and they are excluded from the vote because of that restriction. And then what I would do is that I would get either petitions from them or letters from them saying that these are the restrictions and that they want to vote, but this legislation has impeded their ability to vote, right? And so then you document now you've documented who, you've documented how, and then you have the voices of those who are affected by it. So those are some of the things that are important for affecting any issue that you want to bring to the forefront. Like when we were fighting against apartheid in South Africa when I was an undergrad, that we didn't live in South Africa. We weren't directly affected by it in many ways, but our institutions. I went to the University of California, Santa Cruz, and so our institutions were heavily invested in the stability of apartheid. And so we had to find out how much did they have invested. What were the instruments that they used for that investment? And I wasn't necessarily one that found that information out. I was just being engaged. But looking back, those were the things that the folks who were leading the organization that they found out and gave to us so that we could operate under a place of knowledge about what was going on. And then we had people from South Africa who were students at the college, and then they gave us more information about it. And so we used that in a way to make conscious decisions. So when you're making a protest or a rally about something, you want to have be as informed as possible about that, and then you can position yourself in such a way that you're going to reach out to those legislators, because those are the people who are going to be able to change the laws. Or the other strategy, obviously, is that you sue them, right? But then you still have to find out what is it that you're suing them about. So you still need to know if you're suing them, you're saying that they're violating something or that they're causing harm to some group of people by their actions. But then that harm has to be, okay, what is the legislation that demonstrates that harm, right? So you have to find out all that information so that you're approaching it in such a way that you have the right kind of information and not only that you're informed, but then you're able to unravel things. Because sometimes when you're fighting against things, there's layers, right? And you have to unravel the layers of what's going on. Legislation is like looking at laws that are passed that when you go to court and you're looking at things, and one thing refers to another thing, which refers to another thing, which refers to another thing. So you get trapped in these loops of trying to figure out what this legislation is actually saying, because it says, well, as it says in HR, blah, 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 right? And so then now you don't really know what's going on. So you have to unpack that stuff. And sometimes that's why a lot of times lawyers are the ones that are involved in helping people do these things, because they help them to unravel the minutia and the confusion that's there.
It sounds like we need to have across the board the same vote, same machines, same schedule, same scenario in every state. What are your thoughts on that? It sounds like it would prevent a whole host of problems, and it would prevent anybody saying that it was unfair in Nevada, but it wasn't. It was fair in Kentucky or something like that. You know what I mean? Do you think we should be across the board, have the same exact voting setup in every state?
I mean, in some ways, I think that we should, right? I just think that with today's technology, there's also challenges with that, and that the challenge if you do that, then the challenges become much more broad, right? So then there's one system or one reporting thing, and if there is a virus or there's an attack on it, then the whole thing is negatively affected, and we have to think about what's the challenge with that. I have another challenge even with the electronic voting process, and I think that we need to have a discussion about this publicly. That is, and that is that I think that there should be no proprietary software for voting machines. That this needs to be something that why is it that it's a simple tabulation in many regards, right? That when you click here, that vote goes there and it's counted. And so then the more simple the process is, the less opportunity it is for there to be some kind of manipulation. But the more complex it is, if we have to have 1,000 algorithms to tell you how many people voted, well, I don't understand why that's necessary. A click or on the manual version, if it's you check it or you punch in a chat or whatever it is, the same should be true in the electronic version, that it should be simple, as opposed to the complexity that we have in this system now. And I remember about 6 or 7 years, maybe about 8 or 9 years ago, that I remember voting on one of the electronic machines, and every time I tried to push in somebody's name, it wouldn't let me push it in. And so you're like, wait a minute now, I want to vote for this person, but the machine itself is not allowing me to do it. What's my recourse? And then you can stop and you can do a provisional ballot or something, but then the provisional ballots are counted in a different cadence. So all of these things have to be weighed in on our discussions. And it's not an easy answer, but in many regards, I think that a national policy about voting would make things better. Like, I think that when we moved in many of the municipalities that they moved their municipal elections to November, I think that saved a lot of money, right? Because you're having elections 2-3 times a year. It's expensive. Elections are not cheap. And so if you only are doing that in a way that's conducive to the voting machine, if you will, those who are in office and ushering things forward, I think that undermines the value of the money that's spent. That's the people's money, right? Because in the end, if you're in elected office, if I'm in elected office, anybody else in elected office, the money that you're using is the people's money, and you need to use that money wisely and to the best ability of respecting the money, because it's not, for the average person, it's not easy to come by the money that's collected for taxes, county, state, federal. That's hard-earned money. It's not like it's for the average person that is just, oh yeah, there's money collected. Here's my $100,000. No, that 25% took a lot of work for somebody to get. That 10%, that 25%, the 30% for some people, that whatever it is, the percent brackets that you're in, if we understand the level of work that it took if we had a machine that showed the amount of energy it took for that person to create that amount of money, for then that money to go to government, and you could value the amount of energy it took across the country to produce that amount of money, then I think we would see differently and value people differently. And I think that's an important switch that we have to have, that we've got to value the workers. And this is not a union statement, but I just mean in terms of anybody who's earning money and then paying taxes, that's a process that we don't value enough that people actually do.
That was Essex gold for you right there, students. Dr. Khalfani. I 100% agree with you. And the thing that you said that I pick up on most out of that, you're right, we do have a little bit too much technology in the voting process. I think it was literally one simple formula in Excel that tabulates these votes, and here we are, creating proprietorship and having these different software and different companies making this stuff when it's unnecessary. Here's a crazy idea. Tell me what you think about this. Let's go back and let's bring Scantrons and number 2 pencils to the voting booths, because we know that works, and the Scantron counter does it in seconds. We'll have our voting results. They'll be accurate as long as people filled in their circles correctly. We all know and love number 2 pencils and Scantron sheets. They've been giving them to us since we were kids. What do you think about going back to Scantrons, Dr. Khalfani?
Well, interesting that you said that, because Essex County has Scantrons now. And so then they're using a completely different machine than they used previously. And I like that machine a lot. I think they need to put blinders on the side so people can't see you when you're inserting your machine, inserting your chart. But just in terms of that, and then there's a record taken of it, because that's I think the other thing that needs to happen across the country if we're going to have electronic voting, computerized voting, is that there has to be a record. We can't say, oh yeah, give me a receipt, because then if every receipt that's printed, if there's a question, I can just go to you with my receipt and say, here's all the receipts of all the people who voted. They brought their receipts back, and even if 5% don't come back or 10% don't come back, you still have a good record of people who actually voted, and the machine will have a receipt, plus the person can have a receipt. That's what we call a feedback loop, right? And that feedback loop will close the door on corruption. And I think that's how we do so. We can close that loop, and we can think about it differently if we just are willing to, I think a lot of it has to do with political will, right? And willing to be selfless in the process, and to be people oriented in the process, and not about the individual. We've got to move. We have to have a shift. We got to move from this individual and party and other things, and we got to move to it being about the people. And once we really begin to start thinking about it as the people, then I think that we have a paradigm shift in our political process, and that's really what we need, right? Martin Luther King Jr. said, people always focus on his dream speech, but I like the speech where he says we have to have a revolution of thought, right? We have to have a revolutionary shift in our thinking to do something different, and I think that's what we are. We've got to have our thinking about the electoral process, our thinking about the participatory politics. We have to have a brain shift, and be people oriented and people focused, and then I think that's going to bring about the thing that you're asked in the beginning about why would somebody want to limit the things. Well, because by limiting, that means that they have more control over the outcomes. If fewer people are participating, then who's to say that everybody who wanted to participate, that they did, right? If you're standing in line and it's illegal for you to give your mother a bottle of water or a bag of chips while she's standing in line, I can't even fathom that. That's ludicrous. That you can have a misdemeanor slapped upon you for giving somebody a bottle of water. Yeah,
Ridiculous.
You got to be joking me, right?
Absolutely, that's nuts. Receipts. That's brilliant, man. I wish we had receipts from voting, and then there would be no question. You need to run for office.
Well, yeah, well, I can't campaign on campus, but I am.
There you go, students. We didn't talk about it, but there you go. So, the receipts thing is brilliant, man. I really wish that was a thing, honest to God. That would prevent a lot of questions. That would be a lot easier for folks returning to work in case our employers think we're lying. We just show them the receipt. No, we voted.
Yeah,
it's better than the stickers they give us.
Right, that would be better than the stickers. Literally, if you had your thing that said you said you voted and you had a receipt of that. I mean, think about it. To me, that would be historical, right? That you have, especially if the persons that you wanted to get in office got in there, you can say, "See, I contributed to that." You know, it's like your stamp of saying that you were engaged. It shows. It would demonstrate to the people that they it would be like proof that they were actually engaged in making this thing happen.
And then we'd have lots on eBay. I got 2 original Obama receipts. I voted both elections. $200 each. Frame them up.
You know that would happen for sure. Well, so therefore, a receipt could create a whole new market. There you have it, right? We get what do they call them? An NFT.
NFT. I was just going to mention it. Right? Voting NFTs, Mr. Graham. Start writing notes, man. We're going to be millionaires.
Oh my goodness, that's funny.
So, we talked about social media very briefly, but let's get into that just a little bit more.
Okay.
It can be a very helpful tool, and my Lord, it can be the exact opposite of that. Now, Facebook has cracked down on the amount of fraudulent things that appear on the website and stories that people post. But man, all it takes is one bogus story to get flipped around by maybe 1 or 2 people, and they tell 2 friends, and they tell 2 friends, and then before you know it, at the family dinner, someone's saying, "Hey, did you hear? Blah blah blah." It's like, and this has just come from a social media post. Now, this can help and hurt voters and voter suppression. Realistically, is there a role for social media for to have is it worth it to have campaigns to talk about voter suppression there to create awareness for folks who may be unknowledgeable or misinformed to begin with? What's your thought on the social media? Should we ditch it all together, or is there something valuable there that we can use to promote good stuff?
So I'm going to say that, first and foremost, that social media is not going anywhere. So, we have to, sometimes we want to have these conversations about, oh yeah, this shouldn't be involved. It shouldn't be engaged. But you can't, once the cat's out the bag, for say, that old saying, that you can't put it back in there, right? So that social media is only going to morph and change and it continue to explode and explore how it's going to be next, right? So then for the youngest folks, the TikTok is what they do, and sometimes older folks too, but it used to, think about it, it used to be what was that thing called? Oh gosh,
what, Snapchat?
No, way before Snapchat.
Friendster?
What did you say it was?
Friendster?
No. This is like 10, 15 years ago with one of the very first ones.
MySpace?
MySpace. Oh my goodness gracious. So that was it, and then each one of these things morphs into something else. And then you have, now you have a million of them that are popping up. So you have WhatsApp, you have Telegraph, you have, so you have different ones that do different things, and people like them for a variety of reasons. So my take is that, look, as a sociologist, I'm not going to automatically buy into the whole idea of fake news. And that is that, first of all, if it's fake news, it's not news, right? So therefore, even the construction of it is problematic in my assessment. That there's fake information, but it's not really news about what's going on. It's some other kind of thing. But we've always had fake news. if you go back and look at some of the old kind of governmental things that happen from different across the world, there's always been fake information, misinformation that's put out by those in the media who are in cahoots with other folks that put out information it's just more popular today, and it's easier and quicker, right? And it's like the idea that people come to me and say, well, we have a global economy now. I say, well, no, actually, we've always had a global economy. Look at pottery around the world. How did that pottery get here 10,000 years ago, right? 15,000 years, because the economy was global. It just was slower, but now it's faster, it's easier. You can fly, you can send it via text. So it happens so quickly that's the kind of a danger side of it. But then also we have to say, well, are there not conspiracies, right? Sometimes there actually are legitimate conspiracies, and I think that we have to say that the so-called conspiracy theorists are not always just theorists, that they're actually investigating things. So what was the information that was Wikipedia, not WikiLeaks? Did they leak information that was accurate, or was it fake news? Did a Strange list have fake news or real news, real information? Were the Pentagon paper? I mean, not the Pentagon papers. The Panama, was it Panama? The Panama, I think it was the Panama papers. Were they real or were they fake? Right. So when these things come up and people say, "Oh, it's just conspiracy theory," I say let's put a caution on that, and that in and of itself sometimes is just another spin, right? And so then let's investigate a little deeper, and we find out more nuanced information about these things. And when it is something that's false or malicious, then we can handle it in a different kind of way. But just because something is put out there, I would say don't automatically assume it to be false and or malicious. Sometimes it is accidental, and that accidental thing can it's no different than that accidental thing can cause other kind of harms. But it's no different than when I do the experiment in my class with my students, and I tell the first student something, and I tell in a low way so that nobody else hears. And by the time it gets to the 20th person, it's a different story. So that whole thing is nothing new. That always happens, and we have to look at it as though that this is just a new iteration of that thing. Now the thing that changes that is that if you have a video, that video can show something that is either real or fake, and then that begins to tell a story about something out there. But we've seen concocted videos. We've seen evidence of people doing things that were misinformation. There's a documentary called COINTELPRO. If people watch that documentary, you see what happened in the 60s with the misinformation about the Puerto Rican independence movement, the Green movement, the Black Panthers and Martin Luther King and Malcolm X, and all of these things that happened, that there's documented proof about that things that people said about people were inaccurate. And so then was it fake news? At the time, it was presented as fake information or fake news. And so maybe it didn't use that exact word, but I'm saying that they were the conspiracy theorists. And so then that became the place where we have to look at and say, well, what really happened and what is different from, when we do our deep investigations and have multiple sources to validate things. So yeah, we have to be careful. I mean, I'm a victim of it. I've sent some things out sometimes, and I'm like, oh my goodness, that was wrong. So it happens easily, and we all have to check ourselves. So I'm human like anybody else. When you see something that's maybe sensational, you want to click it, but I always push myself now to try to think twice before I send something, or I'll go and investigate. Right, I'll start doing some research to make sure that the thing that I have came from the source that it said it was. If somebody said it came from the CDC or the FCC or the president's office, then I'll go look and see if that was the actual press release.
Yeah, so we definitely need to check the validity of the things that we read and see posted online. Is there a specific site or somewhere that you personally check that you would recommend to students to check validity of things? Like, can we just trust Google to run stuff by, or do you have anything specific you might be able to unearth?
Yeah, well, interestingly, I used to do a lot of stuff with Snoops and other sites like that. And recently I found out that even some of their stuff is problematic, right? Even some of the radio stations I used to rely heavily on, uh, they take ads now. And so now some of the nonprofit radio stations I'm like, I don't know if they, what I'm listening to, and I'm not going to say any names necessarily, but when I listen to, I'm like, because I used to be on radio. I was a broadcaster when I was an undergrad. So my introduction to this field started back in the '80s. When I was for 4 years, I had a public affairs show and I had a music show. My music show was called what was it called? Wise Up. This is DJ RJ coming to you loud and clear. How you doing out there?
Yo, let's talk about that real quick. Where was your radio show?
At University of California, Santa Cruz. Yes, I was a DJ for a long time, and then we did public affairs. We would go out and do man on the street stories and investigative reporting. So that's kind of where I started doing that stuff. And then I had a news magazine called the Kokai, and I did that for about 2 years. And before that, I was part of an organization called Tawanas, which was Third World and Native American Studies. And that was a newspaper. So I wrote articles for it. I helped to, you would be surprised. Back in the day, we had teletype machines that we had to type the stuff. We had somebody who inputted the formatting in a teletype machine. It was all code, and then we would use a halftone machine to change the pictures into a halftone so that they could actually be printed. So it was, and everything had to be, in the end, was laid up by hand. So it was like a sticky paper type thing, and we laid it up, and then it would be set up for the printing press. And before that, I did even the old-fashioned printing press where you had to put in each letter of type, and you run it on a machine. Now I'm talking about each letter of type that you would do everything. So it's been a long, fun career.
Wow. You know what's funny though? You're telling us about all this awesome, fun stuff that you used to do, but it's all like rooted in activism. Do you actually do anything just for fun? Do you just like have a pizza and then throw half of it in the garbage or anything?
Well, when people ask me, do I do? I mean, I like to watch the movies and stuff, but going to a good lecture to me is like exciting. I mean, I love going to hear people speak and as a matter of fact, I'm glad you asked it, because some of the times when I go to hear people speak, I don't even go to listen to what they say. I want to improve my craft. So sometimes I go to just listen to how they deliver. And by watching how they engage with the audience, right? And so those things I think are important for young folks, that I would encourage anybody who wants to be a public speaker. I do a lot of public speaking. And I have a talk I'm doing this weekend for a group in Plainfield. I just have fun with it, man. It's like I've studied a lot. I thankfully know a thing or two. These books on the back of my shelf behind me are a few things that a few of my old friends. And I mean, it just going and learning stuff to me is exciting, because I know that the more I know, the less I know. So in other words, I really don't know anything, man. I've learned enough to know that every time I even just on Google or Wikipedia, and I challenge stuff on Wikipedia, but just clicking on things and learning little facts, I'm like, wow, there's so much stuff that I don't know. And I've had the wonderful opportunity to travel around the world. I've been to China, South Korea, South Africa, Nigeria. I just got back from Burkina Faso. I've been to Brazil, lots of places in the islands. Took students to Cuba, took students to Ghana, took students to South Africa. All those places have given me a wealth of insights to seeing and understanding the world differently. And I just hope to be able to bring some of that back to the people who I interact with.
That's funny you just mentioned that. I have this handy. I know it's probably backwards for you, but it's when you went on the trip to China with the students. And I'm just looking at I was cleaning my office the other day, and October 2019. I don't know if you can see it, but that was right before COVID, man.
Yeah.
Did you feel like you dodged a crazy bullet when you came back from that trip?
Well, interesting. I'm glad you said that. So check this out. So we did that in we were there. I took 8 students and 8 faculty people, and we were in China for 5 weeks. And once we came back from there, then I went to South Korea in February of 2020, and I went to South Africa of 2020. So I went to South Africa, then the mask started to have to be worn on my trip to Korea. And then I got back from Korea just in the nick of time, because once I got back, everything got shut down. I mean, it was locked down. And so I was glad that I got a chance to do all those trips. The one to South Africa, though, we were setting up this amazing program for our students at Essex for the summer of 2020, and unfortunately, it just hasn't happened. And that organization is not existing in the same way. So I don't even know if we would be able to do that. But it was we're going to do something, and hopefully soon. I'm not exactly sure when we're going to really get back into going abroad like that. But I'm anxious to get out there and take some students abroad again.
Yeah, for sure. I don't think anyone's ever done that here. So naturally, I saved that because I thought that was amazing. And I hope you can get back to that in the next however many months.
There's one other faculty person that's take students to Spain, Milna Braun. She's taken students to Spain for a long time. So
that's right, Miss Braun.
Yeah, so she has been a pioneer in that whole kind of Spanish trip that she's been doing for many years. She might have done that even before I took the first group to South Africa. So the first group to South Africa went in, wow, when was that? That was when Dr. Yama was still president. So that had to be like 2008. So yeah, so she might have done a trip before then.
Got you. I just want to check with her just in case. We have Essex County College SGA interim president, Yolanda Brown. Yolanda, did you have any questions for Dr. Khalfani while we're here?
All right, thank you, Mr. I did have a question on his view on the critical theory issue that's going on, to see what his opinion on that was.
Okay, good question. It's called critical race theory. And interestingly, the whole point about critical race theory is that they don't know what they're talking about, right? So that critical race theory, they're using that concept, that idea, as kind of like a dog whistle, if you will, because critical race theory was a theory developed by a group of lawyers, Kimberly Crenshaw, Derek Bell, and a bunch of other folks, and they used that idea to talk about how do we create a better understanding in court cases for juries. And so they used a whole thing on racialized storytelling to help people to understand it. So they used the narrative piece of a story to help somebody to better understand, help a jury better understand why somebody was mistreated, or why something was a racist practice, or why this person was profiled in a particular way. And because most of the juries were white or European, and most of the people who were on trial were African American or Latino or something, that there was this discord. And that's what critical race theory was. It was to create a better conduit for people to understand that. Now, the way it's talked about today, it's basically, and they just looking to pass other laws, basically saying that teaching racialized facts is causing harm to our students because they're forced to learn about a polarizing situation, and it may create discomfort. And so that discomfort comes from the fact that there has been racialized trauma, right? So then there was slavery, right? There was, educational systems that in Prince George County that were canceled because they didn't want to have to teach, they didn't want to integrate the schools, and they didn't want to teach African-American children. So these things actually happened, and people are reticent about teaching the facts about what happened. I just did a workshop with students, with the teachers at West Orange High School for the school district. West Orange fourth and fifth graders. Actually, I did the high school later last year, but I did a Amistad workshop for them to help them to incorporate African history and culture into their social studies classwork. And what I said to them though was that when you have folks who are that don't understand why that legislation was passed in the first piece, then we can't get to the place of actually teaching it, right? So you can't teach African American history if you don't understand why it was a struggle to get that there in the first place. And that's one of the reasons why some of the teachers don't. One, they're not skilled in it, and two, that they don't understand what this push is. And I said that we have to have a social justice discussion with the teachers first, so that they get to the place of understanding why they're even being in a professional development workshop on Amistad, on African history and culture, and why they're being compelled to teach it, because it's a more true story of the American story, right? It's a more accurate story, because the previous American story was not accurate. And we want to tell a more accurate story. And that what I said to them is that story is ever evolving, and not just for the stories of African people, but the Europeans. What were some of their stories that we didn't know? Maybe there's some stories about the Irish and the Italians that we don't know. What were some of the stories about the Native Americans that we're learning we didn't know? What were some of the stories about Asians we didn't know? So all of these different stories are contributing to our further development of our understanding. And so then there's so much more to be known. And I think that the critical race theory argument is one so that we know as little, that we only want to know a narrow amount. And that narrow amount is very problematic. It sounds good for their constituent. And that constituent is like, oh, I don't want to teach critical race. Listen at the sound of it, critical race theory. It sounds like a threat. So they want to present it as something that's threatening to their children and to their communities. And so that's what you have there. And so we have to push back.
Yolanda, excellent question. Yeah, I don't know why we call it critical race theory. You should just call it the truth. That's what it is. It's how it happened. It's not always comfortable. Sometimes it's very, very ugly. And Dr. Khalfani put it best. People are hesitant to embrace critical race theory or include it in the curriculum because it may make students feel uncomfortable. God forbid they feel uncomfortable. It's the truth. It's what happened. That Christopher Columbus story they've been telling us we're kids about the Pilgrims and Indians sitting peacefully, eating a Thanksgiving meal together, just didn't happen. You know what I mean? Why do we have to color it? Why do we have to continue to do that? Why are people afraid of critical race theory? It's what actually happened. It's not an interpretation. We were misinterpreting it, or we were coloring it however we wanted it to make it look appetizing for the masses for hundreds of years. But it's time. Nobody's stupid. We know what really happened. There's documentation. I don't know what else to say about that. People are crazy. What are we going to do? Have two sets of textbooks for the rest of eternity? That can't happen. What are your thoughts about that, Dr. Khalfani? Are we ever going to be able to agree on a people's history of the United States, or is there going to be two textbooks depending on if you live in a blue state or a red state?
Yeah, I mean, well, first of all, there's always multiple sets of textbooks, right? I mean, I'm an author of an Introduction to Sociology textbook, which tells a different story than the other ones that are there. And so it has to do with the publishers. It has to do with the school districts and what they are publishing, and then what we're buying. So if we want to have a different narrative, then we have to buy a different book, right? And that's an important part of getting to that point. And writing a book is not an easy thing. I have a book called The Hidden Debate, which looks at affirmative action in South Africa and the United States. I'm a contributing author to Introduction to Sociology textbook. I'm also a contributing author to a book called White Methods, White Logic, which analyzes that's an award-winning book. It won the Oliver Cromwell Cox Award. The Hidden Debate was nominated for that, but didn't win it. And so then these things are places that we have to look at to say that what are the things that actually happened, and when we look at these different texts, that we have to challenge the narratives that they tell, right? And so that you're not going to necessarily eliminate any one text, but if the other text that's more accurate is the one that's purchased, then the other one's just going to fall by the wayside, right? And so people are going to continue to write things to tell a story or a narrative that facilitates their position. And what I suggest is that, as a matter of fact, I did this in class this morning. I said to the students, I said, if we were sitting down and we watched a lion and a gazelle on the savannah, and each one of them was telling the narrative of their story, how would that story sound, right? It's of the same situation, but the lion might say, oh my goodness, look at all this food out here. It's just such a, I didn't imagine today when I woke up there would be so much food out here. And nah, that one, he looks like he's a little too fast. I'm kind of tired today. Maybe this one over here looks a little slow. That one looks like good dinner, right? And so then the lion chooses, or the group of the pack chooses which animal they're going to go after, and that's what they eat for the day. Whereas the gazelle might say, man, what? And even the way they move their heads, right? The lion is slow and moving and can kind of do like this, but the gazelle is, huh? They're attuned to every single thing, and they're in a kind of a jerky motion because they have to be quick and fast to when a gazelle is born. What does it do? It walks, right? Humans don't walk when we're born. We have someone to nurture us to it. So, but nature created a space for them that if they didn't walk immediately, that they would probably be dinner. And so then the gazelle tells the story that that there's these predators out here, these predator lions, and they're threatening us, and they're bullying us. We can use all those kinds of words that how the gazelles might talk about the lions and the hyenas, and each one of those, they're all at the same watering hole, but they're telling a different narrative. And then you have sitting back at a distance, you have the vulture who has yet another story, and then the lion got gorged by something in the process and died. And the vulture says, well, I guess I see my dinner for the day. Right? And then you could have us back watching all of that. So each layer of the story is told differently, and we want to make sure that there is a more accurate telling of the story. And I think that when we're talking about critical race theory, that there can be a much more accurate telling of the story, and that the narrow story that's been told in the past is inaccurate. And we have to push back and fight to make a more accurate narrative told.
Sir, thank you for fighting. Seriously. Thank you for doing what you do, because without people like you, who are far and few between, we wouldn't have any progression whatsoever in the world. So thank you for fighting a good fight, sir. Much appreciated. We want to thank you for being a guest on the show today. It's an extreme pleasure to have you on. We hope to have you back. I know we'll be Student Life will be collaborating as much as we can in the future. It's a pleasure to work with you. So thank you for coming here today, sir.
Thank you. I'm really honored to be here, and I'm glad all of the folks who were able to tune in were able to do so. And I'll be glad to come back anytime.
We hope that you and your families are doing well during this time. It's getting a little bit warmer out there. Hoodie weather, no jacket, nice. I want to thank Dr. Khalfani for coming on the show today. Thank you all for tuning in. Please continue to stay warm and healthy. Take care of yourselves and each other. We will catch you next time. Until then, take care.